Hey guys, what's going on? James here, and in this video today, we are going to be playing the role of news update people, giving you guys some updates on what's going on regarding Sean Murphy-Bunting in the injury that he had sustained in yesterday's Week 1 game versus the Dallas Cowboys. But I am not alone in this update video. Joining me again from the Cannon Fire podcast, it is Evan. Evan, how you doing, man?
I'm back again. I am back again this time after a Bucs victory. I was on the pregame show, and then we watched the game, and now we have a full game to digest. So, yeah, there was some positives, there were some negatives, including obviously the injury to Sean Murphy-Bunting, which was on the second drive, the second Cowboys drive. So very early, he didn't get to play a whole lot, and very unfortunate. But the Bucs, I don't think it's the end of the world because it doesn't seem to be season ending.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for those of you who don't know, the Buccaneers did win, but there was a loss, in some way, shape, and form. Sean Murphy-Bunting, he had gotten beat on a play. I believe CeeDee Lamb was the wide receiver. He had ran into the end zone. Sean Murphy-Bunting tried punching the ball out at the 1-yard line. His arm was in there, and while his arm was mid, trying to punch the ball out, Antoine Winfield Jr. came barreling in, drilled into both Sean Murphy-Bunting's arm and CeeDee Lamb, thus dislocating Sean Murphy-Bunting's elbow. It was a pretty gruesome injury. I mean, just looking at it, you would have thought the absolute worst. Heck, I thought the absolute worst during the live stream, and I believe the chat felt the same exact way. So it looked pretty grim, but like you said, the overall diagnosis right now is, all things considered, better than what a lot of people thought it was going to be, myself included. As you said, Evan, it is not season ending right now as it stands. This is from Bruce Arians per Rick Stroud. Right now, they're feeling pretty optimistic about the entire analysis of the injury right now, and at least 3 to 4 weeks is the expected recovery time. Is that a safe thing to say?
Yeah, I think you're looking at definitely a minimum, I think, of 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I think that's definite. He's gonna miss time, that's for sure. You just hope that it doesn't get into 5, 6, 7 weeks. So if it's 3 to 4 weeks, though, that's a huge break. Luckily, it's just dislocated. Well, obviously not like good, but luckily it's not a more serious injury to where he should be able to be back. By mid-season, he should be able to be back. So hopefully he's able to make a speedy recovery and be back as soon as possible and be as healthy as possible when he does come back. I mean, just like you talked about, though, really, from the looks of it, you thought, like, oh, this dude has a snapped arm and he's done. Like, you thought this was it. And he went straight to the locker room. He didn't go to the sidelines or nothing. It was right from the field to the locker room, and that's never a good sign either. So this was some positive news that it's not official that it's going to be 3 to 4 weeks, but it's looking like that's the most likely timeline. Barring there's no setbacks or anything like that. Everything stays on schedule.
Me and you had talked about this before we started recording. Short-term IR, that seems like a definite possibility right now. For those of you who don't know, the NFL has changed some of the rules regarding their injured reserve and placing players on that. I believe now you can take them off after 3 weeks, and there's no limit to how many players you can take off. Is that an accurate thing to say, Evan?
I believe so. I believe that's you put them on there, and it's automatic 3 weeks that they're on there, and you can take them off once they're ready to go, or you might have. I believe after the 3 weeks, I think you might. I don't know if you can put them on another 3 weeks. I'm not sure. You might have to put them on for the season if by the end of that 3 weeks they're not ready to be activated. I'm not 100% sure on that though.
Sure. And I know that that's a scary word for a lot of people who are watching this video, or a scary term, right? Injured reserve. Oh my gosh, that means he's going to be out for the entire season. Is what we've been conditioned to believe. But again, listen to us here again, guys. 3 to 4 weeks is looking to be like the expected timeline. So even if he does go on the IR, which is probably going to be the expected move at this point, 3 to 4 weeks, he can come right off there, no problems. And the Buccaneers can have that roster spot where they can bring in somebody to help out and work with some of these options that they may have. And Evan, that is one thing that I do want to talk about here in this video is with Sean Murphy-Bunting being out, he was the Buccaneers' second cornerback. He also pulled double duty playing in the slot a lot as well. So they're going to have to, make up for what is a huge loss to the defense, the secondary in particular. And we have some options here, but first, just kind of talk real quick about that loss that Sean Murphy-Bunting is going to mean to the defense here.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was one of the corners who was really having a really good camp. It seemed like he was one of their best corners in camp. He wasn't, the flashiest player getting all the interceptions, but it just seemed like he had sort of turned that corner. And, unfortunately, early on, he was picked on a little bit by the Dallas offense, but it's not enough of a sample size. It's just not enough. So it sucks for him. It really does. And obviously it is a loss. It's one of your top 3 corners. And admittedly, this team isn't as deep at corner as they are defensive line or wide receiver or tight end. Like it's just not the same. So obviously Ross Cockrell can step in and he can play a role for you. But you don't want that guy playing, 15, 16 games as a starter. That's not, if Sean Murphy-Bunting were to miss the season, that's where you'd have to probably look outside to find some help. But obviously Carlton Davis is the number 1 guy. He's the most important guy still. It all really relies on Jamel Dean. What type of performance are you going to be getting from Jamel Dean now? Because now he's going to have to step up big time now and didn't have a great camp and really struggled last night. Really struggled. The Cowboys just picked on him time and time again. It was almost very similar to his debut against the Seahawks in 2019, where Russell Wilson was just picking on him. And I don't think I've seen him look that bad since that Seahawks game. So hopefully he'll be able to bounce back. But that's the biggest thing. I mean, if Dean can't bounce back, you're talking about the Bucs maybe having like one good corner. And that's where the loss of Murphy-Bunting will really hurt. And also their versatility. Murphy-Bunting is a guy who can play both inside and outside. And Cockrell's can do it a little bit. Dean's more of an outside guy. You would be struggling to find that answer for that nickel back kind of.
And that's kind of the first 3 guys that come up in, or first, 3 guys that come up in my mind, right? You mentioned 2 of them, Jamel Dean, Ross Cockrell. Those are going to be the first 2 guys who get that look, right? Before the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I think, do really anything in regards to bringing in somebody who's going to be getting more snaps in that type of capacity as a number 2 corner, they're going to give Jamel Dean and Ross Cockrell a shot. That's just 100% going to be what's happening. Another guy is going to be D. Delaney. Maybe he works his way into the rotation. Bruce Arians was a very big fan of his in preseason and training camp. So who knows? That might be a situation. If maybe Cockrell struggles a little bit, maybe Dean struggles a little bit, you might see D. Delaney work his way in there. But absolutely, the Buccaneers are going to look at the guys that they have right there in front of them with Jamel Dean, with Ross Cockrell, and D. Delaney as the first 3 guys who are going to try and step up and fill that void. Like you said, it's a starter. It's your number 2 corner. It's a versatile number 2 corner at that. This is a pretty big loss for the secondary. Yeah, SMB wasn't looking great at the start of that Cowboys game, but that's happened to plenty of players before, and they end up recovering very well. So at the end of the day, we don't know how he would have finished that game. So we're not going to sit here and try and just say like, it's not a big loss. No, at the end of the day, it's a loss, and it's one that can affect the Buccaneers secondary in a lot of ways. But besides those 3 guys there, Evan, a couple more options that we have here. Number 1 is Herb Miller. He's on the Buccaneers practice squad right now. They like him enough to keep him on that practice squad over a couple of other guys who were in competition for that 5th cornerback job. Obviously, D. Delaney won that job, but could they call Herb Miller up in this situation to kind of take SMB's roster spot if they do end up putting him on that short-term IR?
I think it kind of all depends on what they've seen from Delaney so far. I think that's a big It's a big factor because clearly they have determined that D. Delaney is the better football player than Herb Miller. They have determined that by keeping D. Delaney on the roster and waiving Herb Miller. So I think it really depends on how Delaney's looked, which unfortunately we don't know. And we also don't know, how comfortable the coaching staff is with playing him in the slot or on the outside. But what Herb Miller does have running for him is that he's played in games last year for this defense. And maybe if they do get in a pinch and they feel like Delaney's not really ready, maybe they do call up Herb Miller. And very similar to what they did with Andrew Adams yesterday. They called him up about 2 hours before the game. Maybe they do something similar with Herb Miller.
You talked about Andrew Adams specifically, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Herb Miller. Will they call him up? Maybe. I would say at least they're going to protect him and possibly elevate him up with one of those 2 roster spots on a game day. I think that that's the very least of what they're going to do. But you mentioned a safety, Andrew Adams. I'm not saying that Andrew Adams is going to go in there and make up for some of what SMB is leaving void there. But 2 guys who could do that, and it's a little bit of a wonky situation right now, is Mike Edwards and Antoine Winfield Jr. Now, I think that is purely dependent on Jordan Whitehead coming back because, look, you're already, thin at safety, right? Andrew Adams reverted back to the practice squad. You've got 3 healthy safeties right now whenever you're not calling up Andrew Adams. What do you think about that? Could they afford to move one of those guys down into a slot cornerback position? Something that both those guys have done, by the way.
Yeah, and I mean, really, they're even more thin at safety now because obviously signing Jaydon Mickens to the 53-man roster while waiving Chris Cooper. They're even more thin at safety now. So doesn't seem like you knew that, but but I will say Andrew Adams has not been signed to the 53-man roster, but it seems like that might be the route they're taking, right? It seems like they might be going that route. It does sound like Chris Cooper's going to go right to the practice squad. It's just basically a swap of Mickens for Cooper. That's basically what it is. Andrew Adams, maybe he goes to the 53-man roster, and then you have that safety there. But that, to me, that's a clear indication that Jordan Whitehead is almost ready to play. And Bruce Arians himself said about 90% chance that he could play against the Falcons, which leads me to believe that if this Cowboys game was played on Sunday and not Thursday, I think Jordan Whitehead would have played. If Bruce Arians the day after the game is saying, "Oh, there's a 90% chance that Whitehead could play the next week," I think if Whitehead had 3 extra days of rest, I think he might have been able to play. But going back to the question, I think if they were to do that, you would see Mike Edwards more likely in that role than Antoine Winfield. I just think they like Winfield at safety. They can do so many different things with him at safety. And I just think they don't want to really mess that up right now. Edwards obviously has an extra year of experience in the defense than Winfield does. I think if anybody was going to fill that role, it could be Mike Edwards. But like you said, if Jordan Whitehead isn't returning, you can't do it. So you can only really do it if Jordan Whitehead comes back and is back 100% healthy. So really, it's dependent on a player who wouldn't play any role there or at the cornerback spot. But we'll have to see what happens there. But I think you could definitely see something, or maybe not like as like a starter, but maybe there's some packages with Mike Edwards as the nickel corner now. Maybe they add those in. Maybe Antoine Winfield. Who knows? I think you could see something like that similar in the near future.
A couple of more names I do want to mention from other teams is Antonio Hamilton, right? He is on the Arizona Cardinals practice squad right now. He was pretty deep in that mix for making that 53-man roster. In my opinion, and we don't know, I think he just got beat out by D. Delaney, by maybe not like a super thin margin, but I feel like it was a close battle, right? And Bruce Arians came out and said point blank, hey, Antonio Hamilton's pretty good at playing the nickel. We just need to, work with him playing outside. Antonio Hamilton, I think, would be welcomed in the nickel at this point. Could you see them potentially adding him?
If they were to add somebody on the outside, I think he might be the most likely guy just because it's familiarity. The Bucs let Andrew Adams sign with the Eagles, in the offseason. Andrew Adams gets cut, and now he's back with the Bucs practice squad, and now he's playing week 1.
Yeah.
It's familiarity there, and I think a guy like Antonio Hamilton, the Bucs can sign him, and now I mean Antonio Hamilton can refuse. We talked about that before. We talked about that with the whole roster cuts thing. a player can decide to just stay on the practice squad. But if you're going to get a chance to play and you're going to be on the active roster, as a team, if you're signing somebody from a practice squad, you have to put them on your active roster. Can't go from practice squad to practice squad. A guy like Antonio Hamilton maybe sees that opportunity. He was a guy who had all training camp with him, is familiar with the system so far, and I think the coaches know him well. So if they were to bring in any outside corner, I think Antonio Hamilton would be the most likely.
And I do want to say, too, as I've seen a lot of people talk about this in the chat, no Richard Sherman. That's not going to happen. It's just money and scheme fit. There just isn't much logic behind it, right? I think that's a fair thing to say, Evan.
Yeah, you could see maybe like the Richard Sherman stuff starts to heat up if Jamel Dean really struggles, or like a Jamel Dean or Carlton Davis get banged up. Then you might look at taking a flyer and just seeing what works. As far as the money goes, it would be a little bit of an issue, but at this point, how much is Sherman actually going to get? I mean, we've already started playing games, so how much is he actually going to be looking for? And to play with Tom Brady on a team that's a Super Bowl contender, I don't really think the money would be an issue. Scheme fit, it is a little bit of an issue there. You wonder sort of how much he has left in the tank.
Yeah,
he's 30, there's also some. Yeah, and there is some legal issues with him. There's some stuff there. I believe with his girlfriend or something. I don't really know all the details, but yeah, I really wouldn't expect it unless like I said, one of two things: Jamel Dean is just absolute toast, and they literally just can't win football games with this guy as their number 2 corner, or one of Jamel Dean or Carlton Davis gets injured.
Yeah, and then finally, 2 more names I want to mention. Buster Skrine, he's a free agent out there. Just in the research that I'd done, he was kind of the guy who has probably the closest link to Todd Bowles in terms of starting experience and whatnot. He had a handful of years there where he was starting in Todd Bowles' defense. That is what it is. And then also one name that kind of took me by surprise, Parnell Motley. He is on the Lions practice squad. Maybe they bring in Parnell Motley, Who knows? He's familiar with the system. He knows what's up.
I wasn't expecting that. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a name. I like that. I might like that more than Antonio Hamilton. As far as likelihood, I still think Hamilton is more likely. But I mean, the 2 names you brought up, Hamilton and Motley, I think are 2 names that make a lot of sense. I know the Bucs really liked Motley and they wanted to keep him last year. It just didn't work out. So maybe they do circle around. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, Jason Light's done that with Andrew Adams for 3 years now, and Kevin Minter in the past as well. So I don't know, Evan. But regardless, look, we've talked about the injury. We've talked about how long SMB is going to be out for, at least 3 to 4 weeks. We talked about some of these options that the Buccaneers will look at both in-house and potentially out-of-house as well, depending on the circumstances and whatnot. So, Evan, I think we've covered pretty much everything here. So, before we end this video, do you have any final words?
Yeah, go check me and Rhett out on the Cannon Fire podcast. We have a YouTube channel, and plus anywhere you can find a podcast, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, wherever you can find a podcast and listen to a podcast, you can find the Cannon Fire podcast. Also, we have a watch party coming up November 14th. Now the season has started. It's going to be here before you know it. So November 14th versus the Washington football team. We are hosting it at our friends over at Berry House Brewing Company, and our friends at Wing Box are also catering it with some awesome wings. It's free to get in. It's completely free to get in. Just come, watch the game, have a good time, hang out with me and Rhett. James will also be there, have a good time. And there's more information on the Cannon Fire podcast, social medias, and the YouTube channel as well.
Absolutely, and I will link that in the pinned comment down in the comment section down below. But anyway, guys, I thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know your thoughts about all of this down in the comment section below. Hope you guys all enjoyed, and as always, we will see you in the next video or the next live stream. But until then, and as always, guys, goodbye for now, and go Bucs.